Hey everybody, it's Kat, and I want to welcome you to this episode of Backstory Sessions. I'm joined today by my co-host Matt. Hey Matt.
Hey, Kat. Hey, everyone. How are you?
Well, happy Labor Day tomorrow to everyone.
Yeah, it is Labor Day already. The end of summer.
I know, so here we are in September.
Actually, doesn't when does summer end?
Um, I don't know really.
Yeah,
Some people think it's never going to end because it's been like 100 degrees all week. So
there. Yeah,
yes, here for sure, and probably other places, but for sure in Kentucky. But I don't really know what the official start of fall is. Maybe October, or maybe September 20th is coming to my mind, but I don't think that's really anything. So
it is September 22nd is the last day of summer.
wow, that's the day my dad died on. So I should probably remember that. But it is September, and it's really hard to believe
Yeah,
that the year is just blown by in many ways.
yeah. Yeah, it certainly has for sure.
Well, it's been a busy time, and I think that always makes the time go by faster.
Yeah, lots going on. You you had your play, right? Did we talk about that last week?
Well, so I don't think we really did we?
I don't know.
We can't remember if we did
Yeah,
or not.
no. Yeah.
Well, it went splendidly. It was beautiful, and I don't think we did talk much about that it had happened, but it went really well, and it was a sold out show. The weather was very nice and accommodating, and by all accounts everyone had a wonderful time.
Oh, I believe we did. We did talk about it a little bit, at least, because I know the introduction for last week's episode had something about it in there. So, so you're busy writing another play?
Well, so I have 1 week. So from the last Saturday was the end of that show,
Right.
and it took me Sunday to recuperate from just all of that. But so then I have a week to write the new show, and then it'll actually be posted for auditions starting tonight, and then next week will be auditions. So 2 weeks basically after a show closes, the next show has to be written and cast. So I mean, I think people don't really know that part of it. When they come to the show, it's just like,
Yeah, it's a lot of work. A lot of work up front to put
yeah.
it together.
And, you know, thankfully, you have helped me to co-write this latest one, Hotel California.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting for sure.
And I mean, I don't know how people are going to react to it. Like the part of that, that loves the Eagles and Hotel California music are, I think, gonna, I would think they would love it to just, think about like the concepts of it and things like that, and trying to put those into a fictional, hotel that you're making up.
Yeah,
Eh,
the lyrics and stuff. We incorporated some of that imagery in the lyrics into the play, and it was basically our interpretation of what the lyrics mean.
Yeah, and a lot of people have always, there's been a lot of documentaries and interviews with different members of the Eagles. And so people have been curious about what that song means, because it's not cut and dry, like
Yeah, I think I read something about Don Henley saying it was, like the excess in Hollywood or LA during the 80s that they found when they went out there to record. And, it was the song was written sort of all about that.
I did. I saw something about that because like I started reading different things that I could find when I was thinking, well, how could we, what does it really mean? Like, what is a Kalita?
No,
you know,
yeah.
uh,
Yeah, a lot of people think it's about drug addiction and that sort of thing.
yeah.
It may be to some extent, but it's, you know, I think it's more than that.
Well, and I think, so in our fictional story, it's obviously more on the lighthearted, spirit of Halloween kind of ghost, keeping you there kind of,
Hmm.
you know. But I will say that in the writing of it, I mean, there's a lot of thoughts that I had, deep thoughts about life and how these characters were feeling, versus how I feel. And so I would have to say I was really surprised that it'd be almost like watching Saturday morning cartoon and then thinking like, oh man, that's like a deep,
Yeah,
like
like,
the Road Runner. Wow, I mean,
yeah, yeah. SpongeBob gets philosophical.
yeah. I mean, so I had those feelings. So I don't know. Yeah, I had some, something else, but it was just pretty bizarre. I was surprised at that. But, overall, I'm excited. Like the cast, we don't have a cast yet, but the people that are auditioning will soon see the script, and I'll be very curious to see the feedback because I think it might be one of those that you'll love or hate.
Yeah, it is a little bit different than the last ones that you've done. So it will be interesting to hear what people think of it.
Well, so if you take the writing away, and all of that, it's a very technical piece. And that is something very new for us because, we're a mobile troupe. So we are very seldom in the venue more than like an hour to 2 hours before the show.
Hmm.
And that's the other thing, people don't think about is like in traditional theater, you generally have a home stage and you can build a set and you can block and practice and, all of that. Well, I mean, everything that we do, like we're looking at two different venues for this show.
Oh, really?
And they're very different from each other. So staging it, in our minds or on paper for one of them is going to be very different than how it might look in the other venue because some are like rectangular and open and some are like round spaces with like I don't know poles or
Right. Yeah.
support beams in the middle of the
Yeah.
seat area. I mean, you just never know, you know. So one, it's really difficult to put a lot of technical stuff in because like let's say you've got lights that you want to use. Well, if you don't have any control over, the house lights, like if they have to stay up, then really it doesn't matter what color lights that you have.
Yeah. That will be a challenge for you, I'm sure, because there's a lot of technical elements that you'll need to bring in to do a production of this.
Yeah, so if you're out there listening and you're in the Kentucky area that, southeastern Kentucky or even central, reach out to me if you're a tech person because, I think that people that set up these elaborate Halloween, like whether it's a haunted forest or,
Yeah.
you know, there's all kinds of those things that people are really good at, like the elements of, and so this is that kind of thing, I think. If you were good at that, you could really be a big help for this, I think.
Well, there you go. Hopefully you'll find someone to work with and get that going pretty soon because you're going to need some time to figure all that out.
Yeah, because although I don't know the exact location of one performance just yet, I do know that the dates will be October 18th and 19th. So, you know, when you look at that, it's a short time
Yeah,
that
you only got a month and a half. So,
you have to put it together.
yeah.
So, but I'm excited about it. I mean, now that it's finished, I can just like, I don't know, feels like a sigh of relief in a way.
Well, we'll see after people read it and give us some feedback on it.
Well, and I mean, I know it's going to pick way back up to stress level when it's time to start trying to figure out how are we going to do this. But at least for now, it's like, because the Christmas show, I'm already thinking like, okay, I've only got a couple months now till I have to have the Christmas show written. So, it's that same kind of it's almost like the Hotel California, just never ending.
Yeah.
You can check out of one performance, but you can never leave because,
Right.
it's like that. But I do think, that it ties in well with our guest today, Michelle Maidenberg. She has a book out, Ace Your Life.
Yep.
And, I think that's what everybody wants to do, right? I mean, everybody wants to say, I've got the best life that I can have.
Yeah, I mean, it's more so there's a lot to the book, but it's ways to become unstuck, I believe.
Well, I mean, we've dealt with this topic before, and, in Unstoppable, it talks a lot about being stuck and getting unstuck.
That is true.
So, I mean, I think it's a reoccurring thing in life that, the life's up and downs, and sometimes you can just, whether it's in the high or the low, you can just like get stuck in that.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of different ways, and yeah, so there's lots of different ways you can get stuck, and sometimes you need a little help to get past things.
Yeah, because I think usually the familiar is more comforting than the unfamiliar.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what keeps a lot of people stuck, is that even if it's a bad situation, it's a familiar and you know what to expect. Whereas to take the leap to get out of that, you know, may put you into a very uncomfortable situation that you've never been in, for the short term. So you I think when people start thinking like, okay, I'm going to get out of this relationship, for instance, or this marriage or whatever, then it's like, okay, well, it's a bad marriage. I don't want to be in it. But then that means we have to sell the house.
Right. Yeah.
That means, okay, so if we sell the house, then where am I going to live? So your mind starts playing out like all the changes that you're not familiar with. So it's easier just then to be like, okay, well, you know, I know what this is like, so I'll just like ride this out rather than rock the boat and not know what's going to happen.
Well, I mean, some people would call that a little foolish. I mean, but I understand. It's hard to break out of your comfort zone and, you know, do things that are new, and it applies to lots of different things, not necessarily just relationships. I mean, it could be a job or a starting a business or any of those things, any of those big life decisions that you have to make.
Yeah, well, the job would be the same thing. Like a lot of people are unhappy in jobs that they currently have,
Hmm.
but you've got what the paycheck is for you. And if you walk away from that, then you're uncertain to, will I find another job?
Right.
How soon will I find another job? Will it pay, a sort of a same ballpark amount? Will I be happy in that job? Like, what if I leave and I, wish I didn't leave because
Right.
I lose health insurance for, whatever, so I do think it's just that unfamiliar, that talks you in your mind that you can talk yourself into staying in the stuck position.
Right. But I mean, if you do find a way out of, or through all of that, and make the leap or whatever, you may find that it was the best thing you ever did.
I think in most cases, getting unstuck is always the best option.
Yeah.
Like if we're not happy, I think you should seek happiness. But I'm just saying I think that's what keeps people
Yeah. Understood.
from doing it.
Well, let's talk to Michelle and find out what her thoughts are. It should be an interesting conversation.
Yes, and for the listeners, she's a professional, so listen to her ideas.
Yes. We're
And
just, yeah.
leave their, leave their job or bad relationship or any of that. Like,
Right. We're not advocating for that. We're just saying that, it's it's an option.
right. And I mean, we've just been writing like a play that has ghosts, you know.
Right. So, yeah.
Yeah, take it with a grain of salt.
Right. All right. Well, let's talk to Michelle and see what's up.
All right. Dr. Maidenberg, I want to welcome you to Backstory Sessions. We are really excited to have you as our guest today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it's over your career, you've had several books that you've written, and we want to talk about your career and about some of the other books. But I'd like to start with the current book, Ace Your Life. Could you share a bit of the backstory behind your decision to write that book?
Sure, sure. It is my labor of love. So I really feel like it's a culmination of all the work that I do with my patients, and I'm so proud of it because I always really wanted, to write, it's, I find it's a method. I call it a method. ACE Your Life, ACE stands for, is predicated under acceptance, compassion, and empowerment. And that's the methodologies I use, when I work with my clients. I find that the barriers, in each kind of parts of the spectrum get in the way of us really culminating, being our best self and living the life we want. So, and I use in the title the word unleash because I feel like it is all within us. Sometimes we just need to unleash it because for whatever reason, it's, there are barriers that unfortunately don't allow us, to really kind of find our golden shadow or our best self. So it helps to do that. It's really based because a lot of the work that I do is based in like acceptance and commitment therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization reprocessing, mindfulness. So it's really a conglomerate of all of those types of treatments. And it really helps. I teach the skills from, anybody who's about middle school age up, through adulthood. So they're very user friendly. They're very, engaging. And also, like I said, it's really a method that you could use throughout your life when you're dealing with any kind of decision making, stuckness. It helps with any of that.
Well, I'm glad that you brought up stuckness because you do mention that concept in the book too. how is it that people end up stuck? I guess that's the first question.
Well, that's a very big question, and it's a good question. So there's, it depends. Some of us have interpersonal relationship challenges, right? For some reason. Some of us have, issues with our career, some with our family, some with, there's all different reasons because we all have some kind of, we're not perfect human beings and we all have some kind of suffering and we all have challenges. Some people have academic challenges. Some people, again, for all different kinds of reasons. Some of us have trauma histories, right? Some of us have barriers, which could be socioeconomic or could be social cultural. I could go on and on. So it's usually us getting in our own way. And it's interesting because I ask people often about, let's say, behavioral change. I'll ask them, what is it that you want to accomplish? And they'll tell me. And then I'll say, have you ever worked on this? And has it been, have you have any success? And they'll say to me, yeah, to some extent, right? Even addiction or whatever. And then I'll say, well, what's got in the way of there being long-term change? And they'll say to me inevitably that, they could make change for the short term, but it's really hard to maintain change for the long term. And that's where I come in. I help from A to Z, like identifying, why it is that you're leaning outside of your values, what could help, what are the barriers, what could connect you to it, and also how to sustain the behavior over time. And often, like I said, it's an absence of a lack of acceptance, wanting things to be different than it is. And often we don't have control over that, unfortunately. Sometimes we do. Compassion, we learn compassion towards others. We never really learn about self-compassion. There's no way that we formally learn that. And empowerment. How do we empower ourselves to really sustain change over time, increasing our confidence, leaning into our values on a daily basis. So all of that is really important. And also knowing what your intrinsic values are. Because most people, although they say they know what their values are, when it comes down to it, it's hard for them to really identify their key and core values. So yes, we've in all of that.
So do you find that there's a difference between the number of men that are stuck or women, or do we know?
No. There's every person, inevitably has stuckness. I don't know a person. If I ask you, what's a challenge for you, right? I'm sure that you could tell me whether it's parenting, whether it's like career, whether it's, in some of your relationships, like we all do, whether it's, let's say, compulsive behaviors or addictive behaviors. Yeah. Do you know anybody that doesn't have stuckness? I don't know anybody. Like that's if you know somebody who doesn't have stuckness, then they're not a human being. Let's put it that way. Because it's just intrinsic in our humanness. That's just the way it is. We all collectively have stuckness. That's the way we roll.
So is it then that some stuckness, since we all have it, is not really going to stop us from living life? Like some stucknesses we may be accepting of, I guess, whereas other stucknesses may make us feel like we are paralyzed to move forward.
Yeah, but I believe you could really get through most stuckness, depending on what it is, of course, but it doesn't have to, paralyze us. And it does often because we feel hopelessness. That's why, we kind of spiral and we get like, we really get down on ourselves and we, get hopeless and, we have a hard time, we kind of repeat negative patterns of behavior that are familiar to us. So there's, like I said, there's so many barriers. There's so many barriers that kind of keep us there. And we need to identify what those are so that we can actually do the work. Often we just find ourselves in these ruts and we get like really, really helpless and hopeless. And, and it gets very frustrating for a lot of people. It's very self-deprecating. And, and a lot of people also don't know how to get through their stuckness. They're so stuck that they lose all hope. They really do. And I could tell you just from people that I treat, people go through all different kinds of treatments sometimes and they don't know where to go from there, right? And they think that they're going to find the magic trick that's going to help them to work through it. And guess what? The magic is within them, not anywhere outside of them. And that could be weight loss. It could be, advancing in your career. It could be anything, right? Like, I don't know anybody who wouldn't want to be a better parent, for example. Like, do you know anybody? If you ask them, like, could you be a better parent, or could you use like skills to be a better parent? Who wouldn't want to take advantage of that? Like, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it really applies to really everybody, honestly.
Did you find that after the pandemic, people maybe were feeling more stuck or more isolated?
I think the stuckness changed. It's interesting that you asked that, but I think the stuckness changed. Because we were so isolated, I think things came up for people that maybe didn't show up before, or that they had to confront, that they maybe were in denial of or avoided, but it was kind of in our face, right? Like, how many people, ended up leaving their relationship? I could tell you in my practice, just so many people had very, significant challenges in their relationship. Because there's different, it's different when you have to be stuck with somebody 24/7, right?
Right.
And before you could kind of run out of your house and not be home and not have to deal with it. But then when it's your face, it's a little bit, right? Academic challenges, like kids were struggling, And by the way, people who were anxious loved it. They loved that they didn't have to challenge themselves socially. Oh my God, my anxious clients loved the pandemic. The people who loved to socialize and felt effective in their in their socialization, those people kind of suffered.
Mm.
So it depended on who we were talking about, And then the people who I worked so hard on helping them with their, let's say, anxiety, think about how challenging it was to get them out there again afterwards. Gosh, it was quite challenging.
Sure. So I guess in some ways that would be like the example you talked about of people that were, maintain something for the short term, and then, the pandemic hits and that puts them in a great comfort zone, and then it goes away and they have to then, have the challenge of trying to work back out again.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an interesting thing too, weight loss. So I saw two things happen. I saw a camp of people who all of a sudden took advantage of really getting into their fitness and wellness, right? And some people lost substantial amounts of weight and started exercising. Like, they took advantage of kind of being indoors, so to speak, right? But and then I found the opposite. Some people gained a significant amount of weight because they were locked indoors, they overate, they weren't exercising, they weren't really taking care of their health. But that depends on the person, and then afterwards, some people maintained it, some people did not, So again, it's like, what's the difference between these kind of groups of people? There's significant differences. So it's all, quite interesting if you think about it, just like people's reactions too. Whether they thrived or, went in the opposite direction too. So it's, yeah, I think that's just so interesting to me, when I was treating people too, at that time, at least.
So an interesting question, and I find it all fascinating too. An interesting question I have thought about, since you used, the anxious person, are they better off? Like, if they feel comfortable, staying in a world where they're not going out, are they better, because they're happy in that? Or are they better off making themselves go back out into the world again?
So I don't know what you mean by that.
Well, so after the pandemic, so many things, maybe they started working from home. You can order your groceries, through an app. A lot of things changed in the pandemic that made the world easier to stay at home and away from people if you wanted to. So if they're happy in that way, you know, are they better off staying like that, or do they need to pick up where they were before of, making the progress to socialize and move beyond what they're comfortable with?
Yeah. So happy and thriving are two different things. Like people are happy when they don't have to challenge themselves, but that doesn't mean that that's productive for them. I think those are two different things,
Hmm.
right? Yeah. So, you could be happy when, I don't know, I'm trying to think. You could be happy when you're kind of a overbearing mom because, you worry that your kid is gonna, is lack safety, right? But is that good for your kid and is that good for you? That creates codependency and it creates a whole host of different issues, like a lack of coping skills for your kid. It creates, insecurity for you as a parent, and I could go on and on, right? So, like, yes, that feels better, but that doesn't mean that it's helpful.
Hmm.
True. Often we have behaviors that we exhibit that feel better, but does it really feel better? Does it really significantly feel better? Like, so in other words, when your child doesn't have, effective coping skills and something happens to them, right? They don't get into the college that they want and they fall apart, you know, I don't know how effective or helpful that is,
Yeah.
right? Or when your child is at the age where they could start driving and they refuse to get their driver's license, and I could go on and on. So, so there's, it doesn't matter what feels good. Like feeling good is not really important. It's really what if we're thriving. Because when we say feeling good, our brain and our body is always going to resort to what's familiar and comfortable. And our brain is wired to, you know, protect us from danger and discomfort. That is how our brain is wired. And when I mean wired, it's physiologically wired that way, right? So we're going to avoid things, and our brains also take the path of least resistance. It doesn't like to work hard. It will do whatever it takes to avoid working hard. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
So
true.
if we always fall into that pit and follow whatever our brain and our mind is telling us, we are not going to be functional. I could tell you that much because I don't know about you. My brain tells me really funky things sometimes. Yeah. Like sometimes it says punch somebody in the face because they're really bothering you. Like I don't want to be, I don't want to be listening to that, or curse out my child because he's really being very irritable to me right now. But we don't want to be listening to those messages because that's not in line with my parenting values, right? So yes, there's a lot of things that our mind tells us to do, right? Like we could wake up in the morning and say, no, I don't feel like working out. I'm too tired. My body aches. Yes, if I always listen to that, I'd never be working out, right?
Yeah.
I have to say what's my value, right? And what do I want to do that's going to make me my best self, not what is my mind telling me to do. You never ever want to react and make decisions based on your thoughts and feelings. You always want to do it in line with your values. Always. I can't say that enough. And people are like, "What mean?" And I'm like, that's the way you make decisions. And when you learn to do it that way, there's always a guide. You don't even have to like think twice because you know what you need to be doing all the time. It's a beautiful thing.
So,
All right. I think that's a good place for you.
Okay, so would you say that people are their own worst enemies in a lot of cases?
It's not we're not our worst enemies. Our minds,
Yeah.
our mind works against. It's our mind that works against us. And I don't mean to demonize our mind because that's not really. It's actually our mind is so wonderful. That's the point because it's so protective and it's trying to do its job. It takes its job very, very seriously.
Mm-hmm.
So we can't even blame our mind. It's only trying to protect us. And again, when I say protective, it could be at times overprotective, right?
Yeah.
So we can, so even like a person who's extremely anxious or depressed or whatever the case is, I always say to them, like, would you really not want to worry that your kid is safe? Would you really, really not want to worry about that? Seriously?
Hmm.
So I'm working with somebody now. I'll give you an example. I had her come in today, and I'm working with her because she has, complicated grief. Her sister unfortunately died very young age, very, very young age.
Mm-hmm.
And he's just having such a hard time kind of working through. And again, it's a complicated situation in and of itself. However, she said to me, am I going to always suffer like this? And she's so exasperated by her suffering, and she feels so helpless, and I said to her, we're not going to get rid of your grief, because do you really want to? Like, isn't it emblematic of how loving and caring you are as a sister and how much the relationship meant to you? Like, do you really not want to be feeling that way? And she was like, yeah, I get your point, right? I said, but what if we turn down the dial, right? What if we turn down the dial that you could actually appreciate the grief for what it is, because it is, right? It's emblematic, like I said,
Mm-hmm.
but not suffer as much, right? Because then it's the thoughts about the thoughts, and it's the feelings about the thoughts, and it's the thoughts about the feelings, and then it's the thoughts about the thoughts. That's where the problem is.
Yeah.
I shouldn't be suffering so much. I shouldn't be thinking about this. I should get over this. And on and on. It's judging. It's judging her thoughts and feelings, which is causing the real suffering. That's what's really causing the suffering.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not the thoughts in and of themselves. It's what she does with them. It's the perception, and that's once she's, and she, when I said that to her, she I could see the sigh of relief on her face. And I said to her, your grief is what's so beautiful about you and so amazing about you. Like, wow. Like, if I had, I would want my sister to be so sad if I would die, like that would be meaningful to me, right?
Yeah.
Like that means she loved me. And like, you are such a loving sister that you feel so sad that your relationship ended prematurely and that you didn't get to have the relationship you wanted. And I honor that. I don't want that to go away. I honor that, and I respect how loving and caring you are. And she had tears like rolled down her eyes when I said that.
Hmm. Interesting.
You know?
So
Yeah.
where does willpower fit into this? Is willpower a thing, or is it just like a made up word kind of thing?
So I don't believe in willpower, motivation, all those lovely words that we like to use. But because again, it puts us in a position of judging our thoughts and feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I'm not motivated enough. Right? I don't have enough motivation. I always tell people, like, look at my wrist and my arm. Do I have a different vein that you have? Okay? Because I am personally a very disciplined person. Like, probably more than the average person. I know that. People always tell me, oh my goodness, how? Like, I eat clean, I exercise 6 days a week. Like, when I have my mind set to something, I accomplish, etc. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm no different than anybody else. I don't have any different veins or different like ligaments or anything else. It's my mind. It's my mind, and it's how I've trained myself.
Mm-hmm.
And anyone could accomplish that, literally. And that's what I help with.
That's
I'm not an anomaly. I'm not an anomaly.
Yeah, I mean, everybody has, 84,000 or 83,400 seconds in a day or minutes, I mean. Is it minutes or seconds? Yeah, I forget. So, I mean, one thing that people do when they start looking at things like this is they go on YouTube and, they start watching videos from these different people. Do you think that's a helpful thing, or do you think their message is like, a little bit much?
Well, I think it depends. I always say that, the problem with obviously stuff sometimes on the web is, it leads us into our judgments of ourselves,
Right.
whether it's our body image or it's whether the way we should think and feel. Like if you go online, 10 ways to be happy, 20 ways to be happy, 30 ways to be happy. But what message does that send? That subliminally, the message, the undercurrent is If you're not happy, there's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
And you better change that right away. And if you don't, you're screwed.
Yeah.
Like that's the message. And then guess what happens? Oh my gosh, I'm feeling this way, so there must be something wrong with me. Oh my goodness, like, this is never going to change, and the helplessness, the judgments, it becomes so like, unbelievably taxing on a person.
Mm-hmm.
Unbelievably. I think also the harm is everybody looking outside of themselves.
Yeah.
And listen, whether like, now there's Ozempic, and don't get me wrong, I think it's fabulous for people who need it. And it's done amazing things for people like who struggle with weight and so forth. However, there's some, I know this, like when they first came out with the, stomach stapling and all of those, different types of treatments.
Yep.
I know so many people, even in my practice, who learned how to cheat on it. Yeah. So they did, they found it out. So basically people literally, like if they stop the Ozempic or they stop it, they're going to gain the weight. There's no doubt about it. Now, I don't know long-term effects of medications like that. I have no clue. And I hope not,
Right.
But, right. And I've also heard people say to me, okay, in terms of confidence, they'll say, oh, I'm on Ozempic, like it's a dirty little secret. You know what I mean? And they don't feel, it's not like they feel proud that they've achieved it on their own. And they, because they struggled with, kind of weight loss and, health, wellness.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, the first book that I wrote is called Free Your Child from Overeating, 53 Mind Body Strategies for Lifelong Health. So that again is another area of expertise that I have, is how to sustain, health and fitness. And like when I do workshops, I'll ask people, how many of you have lost weight? And like all the hands go up. How many of you have sustained it over time? All the hands go down. So we have resources out there. We know how to do things. We don't know how to sustain it. And that's part of the issue that I was talking about before. So I get concerned because I always hear that people look outside of themselves.
Yeah.
And the only way that things actually change is if you grow and you thrive on the inside. That is there's no magic tricks. There just isn't.
So I would guess that most people, I guess the one thing that you said that you have that a lot of people don't have is discipline. And I would assume that a lot of this is based on, or not a lot of it, the struggles that people have is because they don't have the discipline to do the things that they need to do in order to change the situation that they're in. Would you agree with that?
So again, the word discipline, that kind of makes people sound faulty,
Yeah.
Like I'll give you an example. Okay. When I go to a restaurant, okay, with friends, sometimes it's really like so interesting to me. So, we finished our meal and then we're ordering dessert. Okay. Mm-hmm. And the waiter or waitress comes over and I'll say, everybody will go around the table and then they'll come to me and I'll say, you know what, do you have any fruit? So they'll say, well, we don't really serve it. It's not on the menu. I said, well, but do you have any, right? Because sometimes they put a garnish or whatever. Right, yeah. So they said, okay, yeah, we can make like a berry, kind of a berry thing for you. Is that okay? I'm like, great. That's great. Now, the waiter or waitress comes back. They're serving all the desserts. And then they come to me and they give me this thing of berries. And inevitably, people are like, how did you get that? I didn't know that they have that. And I was like, they don't. I asked for it. Yeah. And they said that they could do it for me. And they're like, oh gosh, if I knew that they could do that, I would have done that also. Inevitably, I'm telling you, it always happens. I kind of laugh to myself, And I'm like, well, you should have asked, right? So sometimes it's so simple, right? But then I'll ask people, well, why don't you ask for what you need or want? And they'll tell me, oh, I don't want to bother the waiters or waitress. I was like, okay, if you had a peanut allergy, would you not ask for what you needed or wanted? And they were like, yeah. I'm like, yeah, well, yeah. If you're trying to be healthy and, waiters and waitresses, that's what they do. They try to help you with that. So with any kind of restrictions or like health concerns, like that's why they're there. They would be very happy to help you. You know, it's a matter of asking. It's a matter of putting time and energy and effort into cultivating your values. That's what it's all about. It has nothing to do, discipline really, when you say the word discipline, it's about an active, intentional daily practice. That's what that is.
Yeah.
That's all it is. It's changing your neural pathways so that you're actually, instead of following the same path and the same pattern of behavior, you are changing your neural pathways. And we could get used to anything as long as we put time and effort and energy. Like, listen, we just had the Olympics, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, these people train for hours and hours a day. Okay. Now, you can't even imagine their capabilities, right? Because they're just like superpowers, like literally. If you told them, oh, you're great. Like, you don't need to practice. You're good. They would laugh at you. Right?
Yeah.
They'll say to you, no, like, I'm not going to be right? I'm not going to maintain the behavior, or I'm not going to maintain my fitness unless I put in the hours that I need to. Same thing.
Right.
What makes you think you're going to be like effective at whatever that you need to do if you're not putting the work into it? Not happening. I don't care what it is. I literally don't care what it is.
That is true.
It's not happening.
That is true.
Yeah. So it has nothing to do with motivation. And by the way, motivation comes after the doing, not before the doing. I say do it even if you don't feel like it. That's what I tell people.
Yeah.
I don't care if you feel like doing it. You do it. And when you do it and you increase your confidence, and when you see the benefits, that's when you want to do it again. Because guess what happens? There's an amazing thing called our neurotransmitters. And you have these dopamine rushes, and you have these oxytocin and all these things going on that you're actually changing the physical structure of your body and your brain. Then you're going to do it.
Well, yeah, that is true. You got to get a little bit of winning under your belt so you can see what that feels like, and that just kind of helps things along.
Right.
All right, Kat, I'm going to go ahead.
That's what, I was just going to say, that's what compels behavior.
Right. Kat, I'm going to let you ask one more question before we let Dr. Maidenberg go.
Thank you.
Well, I'm very curious about, so you're the founder and clinical director Through My Eyes. And I found that to be like really interesting. So it's for people with chronic illnesses and
chronic medical. Yeah, medical.
Oh, and so how does it work then?
Sure. So it offers free clinical guided videotaping for chronically medically ill individuals who want to leave a video legacy for their children and loved ones. So, I had a friend, unfortunately, who had her second bout of breast cancer, and she had a 9-year-old child, and I helped her to create this video for her daughter. When we're leaving video legacies, especially for somebody who's chronically medically ill, it offers the ability to be interviewed by somebody who's going to be supportive, who's going to ask the right questions. If you happen to have children, right, they'll ask developmentally appropriate questions. It could be done wherever you want it to be done. Again, it's, free of charge. So those are really important components. And it's also conducted, and you're being interviewed by a licensed mental health professional. So in terms of support and also attunement, towards somebody's need when they're in that position. So I created that because there wasn't anything out there like it. And it was so beneficial for my friend. And I've done over 300 videotapes. And I always get incredible feedback from people I videotape. And their stories move me so tremendously. I cannot even tell you.
So then do they get the copy of the tape to leave, or how does the family member get to see it later?
Yeah. So right now I'm going through a restructuring. I was offering it initially in people's homes, and I was actually physically going there. I wanted to offer it more globally, across the country. And because of COVID and because of technology, it's, I've done it. It's actually pretty easily done. I also made up a questionnaire of over 200 questions, and I customized the questionnaire based on the person's needs, which is also really helpful. So I really am trying my best, trying to get, some help, whether it be a partner or sponsor or even board members, because I have a platform that I really want to do marketing on and etc. I did a videotape like several months ago on a woman who lived in rural America. She had 7 children and she was unfortunately dying of cancer. And she had to go to her doctor's office to get internet connection because she didn't have access to it.
Wow.
Now, there's a person who would never be able to afford it and would never have access to it. So I cannot tell you how meaningful that was for her, both therapeutically, because she was able to tell her story and she was able to leave something with her voice for her children. And also, having the ability, again, to have somebody to sit with her and listen to her and hear her and be interested in her. And she got off, she was so incredibly thankful. She had such gratitude, I cannot even tell you.
Well, that is a really interesting, I would love if my parents, even as an adult now, I would love if they had have been able to leave something like that for me.
Yeah. I did it with my grandparents. I did it with and it was, I have it and it's so incredible. I cannot, it's amazing.
Bye-bye.